Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation to address this distinguished audience. And as a non-Muslim, salam alaikum. Ladies and gentlemen, I will focus on what I, by experience, know best, which is the media, because I work in that circle. I will try not to be too generic, but I want to address the topic, which is very broad, in a kind of general way, so to try to present you the situation as I see it, working with it. Others may have different opinion, but this is what I see working every day in this field since 30 years. Media institutions wield substantial influence in the field of religious liberty. In many cases, the general public becomes aware of human rights violation, especially in uncommon or sensitive contexts, only through media reporting. This responsibility, however, turns into culpability when inaccurate or deliberately misleading coverage distorts public understanding of religious phenomena. Persistent misrepresentation and selective framing shape societal perceptions and inflict a double injustice on religious minorities. They suffer first from violation themselves, and second from the stigma produced by superficial or hostile propaganda. This distortion extends far beyond media audiences, shaping policymakers' attitudes, institutional responses, and ultimately public policy. If such dynamics are already visible within democratic societies, they are intensified in countries where the rule of law is fragile and the relationship between political power, dominant religions, and the media is opaque. The most damaging situations arise where political authorities closely intertwined with a single religion and democratic transparency is weak. In this context, political and religious power jointly define civil and religious orthodoxy, effectively erasing the boundary between state and religion. Groups that fall outside these definitions are rendered illegal, either formally or substantively. This occurs through explicit legal provisions branding certain beliefs as heterodox, as well as through subtler mechanisms such as administrative harassment and restrictive registration procedures. Where the link between political power and a privileged religion is not defined transparently and objectively, discriminations against all other religious communities becomes likely. When the privileged religion acquires the state status without safeguards, discrimination often escalates into open persecution, justified in the name, we mentioned that, of public order, social peace, or security. With regard to the media, the core problem is not merely the existence of these operative frameworks and regulatory constructs, but the tendency of media outlets to echo state narratives uncritically. By failing to scrutinize the legal architecture and social structures underpinning such narratives, the media amplify their harmful effects. Registration procedures, increasingly problematic even in democratic countries, become powerful tools of exclusion in semi-democratic and despotic regimes. Although the media are theoretically expected to provide oversight, they rarely challenge the systems sustaining discrimination when reporting on non-democratic or semi-democratic states, particularly when such scrutiny is inconvenient. In democratic countries, this reluctance often reflects alignment with their own government's foreign policies or ideological groups, both shaped by economic and political interests. Religious minorities pay the price, becoming casualties of international pragmatism or ideological interests. Many professionals, moreover, respond to incentives that need not to be monetary. Public approval, career advancement, or prestige often suffers. Beyond overpressure, one frequently observes journalists anticipating political expectation and becoming more royalist than the king, acting even before instructions are given. I'm not making it up. This is my daily experience since at least 20, 25 years. But I guess you can find it by reading many newspapers or by your own personal experience. Another factor reinforcing media bias is the gap between formality and substance. Religious liberty is a telling example. Nearly every constitution in the world formally guarantees freedom of religion, including in the old days, those of the USSR. Yet political power, even Stalin granted, and if you read the Stalin constitution, he granted religious liberty on paper. Yet political power constantly defines religious liberty to its own advantage, appointing itself as its ultimate arbiter. Where political and religious authorities are intertwined, reassuring legal language coexists with systematic discrimination. Too many media professionals accept formal guarantees at face value and avoid examining their real-world implementation. As a journalist, I have repeatedly observed this among persecuted groups such as the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat in Pakistan and Bangladesh, the Hazara, particularly in Afghanistan, and the Ahmadi religion of peace and light, not to be confused with the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat in several countries. Media indifference remains widespread, compounded by ignorance that present Islam as a monolithic, reinforcing prejudice rather than understanding. This is typical of my country, Italy, where we had this idea that Islam is one single thing defined by, guess who? I mean, they don't have a name. But that is the public perception reinforced by the media. A critical consequence of this failure is that institutions and policymakers themselves often rely on distorted media accounts. Bitter Winter, which I have the honor to serve as director in charge, at Bitter Winter we have seen how asylum seekers are endangered when decision makers depend on reporting that mirrors persecutors' narratives, often because such accounts are readily available on the internet or linguistically accessible. And I need to mention one direct example that we haven't dealt with so much so far, which is the People's Republic of China, which is becoming the power in the world. Almost 2/3 of Africa is in the hand of China. China is influencing so many countries. Speaking to a Muslim audience, China is persecuting with what we can call cultural genocide Muslim, especially Uyghurs and other Turkic minority within its own boundaries, and then supports other countries where Muslims are persecuted, so-called Muslim countries that persecute other Muslim countries. And we haven't seen a reaction by some so-called or Muslim countries that instead support China. Let me therefore offer a personal contribution. I have 2 minutes left, so I will run quickly. And I ask you, I apologize for being late. Let me therefore offer a personal contribution to this indispensable yet enormous task of informing the public. The case of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat is serious, even bloody, in several places. Yet the majority of the people, including those living in countries that could potentially offer protection or assistance, remain largely unaware. They often do not know who the Ahmadis are, simply, what they believe, or why they are persecuted to the point of death. For this reason, I initiated a modest and informational project consisting of a video documentary, which I am filming and doing through the auspices and collaboration of the International Human Rights Committee, which I do thank. IHRS has been a source of very important material on the persecution of the Ahmadis that one doesn't usually find in media. It will illustrate my documentary, and I had the privilege to interview for more than an hour His Holiness the Caliph privately. He's been so gracious to grant me that possibility through friends and allies. The documentary will illustrate their history, beliefs, current situation, and the discrimination they face. It is aimed to the general public with the purpose of serving truth through information and education, and of contributing, however modestly, to the relief of the Ahmadis. When it is finished, it will be but a drop in the ocean. Yet my main goal is to compel people to avoid saying, "I didn't know." I criticized media so far. Of course, not all journalists and media people are not up to their duty. This reminds us, and I conclude, and underlines that everyone has a role to play, yet the media occupy a pivotal position at the convergence of all these dynamics. They are the voice, and they must decide whose voice they choose to be. There is no neutral ground. Thank you.